enjoyable when you don't have to be there 40 hours a week. So anyway, one of these days you'll all get there. Anyway, Chris Cunningham is currently director of the Highway Systems Group, while also managing the Traffic Systems Innovative Program at the Institute for Transportation Research and Education at North Carolina State University. He has been with ITRE nearly 18 years. Mr. Cunningham's work of areas of expertise include traffic signals, alternative intersections, bike and pedestrian safety, and research geared at assisting the visually impaired and blind with regards to ADA compliance. He is a member of several committees at state and national level, including TRB's Access Management Committee. So at this time, Chris.
Thanks, Larry. Okay, thanks for having me. Ooh, helps if I pull up the right presentation. So I don't talk as fast as Gil. He's a speed talker. I've been fortunate to work with Gil for a number of years now, so he's a great resource. There we go. There we go. So I'm going to speak to you today on pedestrian bicycle access issues at some of these innovative intersections. So being in Madison, the first thing I noticed my first time in Madison, there's bike lanes as we got close. And so I have several friends who are avid bikers, biked across the country, and they tell me Madison's a great place to be. So I'm very fortunate to be here. So just a disclaimer, this presentation is a part of NCHRP 0725. Gil is a part of this project, even though he's not listed on the front, because I'm specifically talking about the focus groups today. But this is a guide that's being developed for ped and bike safety at alternative intersections. So the presentation here is going to be based on the focus groups specifically that we've been conducting. We just finished up in Utah, our last one. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to talk about other parts of the project as far as safety analysis, operations, all of those kind of things, specifically the focus groups. So I thought I'd throw a map up here real quick just to show you these innovative intersections that I'm going to talk about today and how they're being implemented across the U.S. And so I don't have a legend here. I threw it in last minute. But you can see they're coming. DDIs especially are hot. They're retrofits. You know, they're coming up everywhere. I'm only showing the ones constructed. If I showed you the ones planned, it would literally cover the whole map. And so you get a sense of the fact that they're coming. Now, Wisconsin does not have a lot up here right now, but they are coming, and I have a feeling they'll start following suit. So the project purpose here, as far as 0725, is to provide engineers nationwide with guidance about ped and bike designs at unconventional intersections and interchanges which are safe, efficient, and what I want to talk about today, preferred by the public. And so presentation focus is going to be about public opinions, and in those focus groups we ask them to focus on two things: level of comfort and quality of service. Two things you don't hear a whole lot when we do design, but we want to focus on level of comfort and quality of service. So what types of questions do we ask? How frequently do you drive or walk through an intersection when we would show these types of intersections? Based on this image, are there any questions you have? We want to make sure that they were very familiar with the designs before we went in from a vehicular standpoint, but also from a bike and ped standpoint. What do you like about the intersection as a bicyclist and pedestrian? Man, all kinds of things would start coming up. We were moderating, digging a little bit, trying to get at what it is they liked or disliked as a bicyclist or pedestrian. Would you be willing to travel through one of these intersection configurations as a ped or bike? The conversations would start and they would go back and forth, so we would generate a lot of conversation around those. Now, as we would start talking about the specifics of the designs, we actually gave them pictures of each one of the designs that I'm going to show you in just a second and said, you know, this is what we expect from you. We took back information, they circled things they liked, they disliked, things they heard from the conversation that they agreed or disagreed with, and we come back and record that information. So just so you have a sense of how this was conducted. And then we also asked them at the very end about their preferred modification. Now, these designs I'm going to show you have different design features in them. We didn't say, do you like this one or do you like that one necessarily. What design features do you like? Because they can be incorporated in different ways. And so we talked a lot about the design features and what modifications you liked. So what worked best as a cyclist and a pedestrian and why? And can you think of any advantages or disadvantages between each of the design components? And then we asked them, are there other features or environmental influences that would make you feel more comfortable as a cycler or as a pedestrian? So would they think about other treatments they would like to see? We heard things like it would be really nice at this type of facility if they had a raised crosswalk or if they designed it in this certain way. So different things that we might want to think about as engineers. So we had lots of bike advocates, ped advocates. We had some planners. We tried to keep the engineers away, actually, because we didn't want to hear what they had to say. That was not what the focus group intention was. All right. So we have, Federal Highway gives a new acronym for everything. So even Gil today had a couple different versions of acronyms. But the first one we talked about here was the median U-turn, which is probably more often referred to as a Michigan left, which Gil said earlier, because there's a lot of them in Michigan. So let me explain really quickly how these work. So if you don't know, west to north, if you're going from the west quadrant to the north, you're not allowed to make a left turn. But in this case, if this was designed, you would come down, make a U-turn, and each stopping point is a potential signal, and you would go north. The south to west quadrant, U-turn, signal, and north. So everybody kind of sees how this works. East to west, okay, just like you normally would do. Is everybody with me? So you're basically redirecting the lefts. That's what almost all of these innovative intersections do. You're dealing with the lefts in most cases. All right, so everybody's got a sense of what this looks like from the driver's standpoint. We did the same thing in the focus groups. We wanted to make sure they understood how this worked from the driver's standpoint. Now, from a vehicular standpoint, they're more efficient. Okay, so they also offer some safety benefits, as Gil pointed out. Now, just to give you an example, I'm only going to do this one time. If the mouse will stop acting up. I can't see my mouse. We showed them an animation. Now, you're not going to have time to see all these, so I'm only doing this one time. But on the animation, we'd show them an aerial view, what it looked like from a vehicular standpoint, and then we would sweep in similar to what you would see from a street view, and we would show them what it would look like from the different quadrants if you were a pedestrian or a bicyclist trying to interact with traffic. And so in our first design here, you'll notice that the bike lanes here, you would have to cross that right turn pocket. So just keep that in mind. If you were a focus group person, you're a bicycle advocate, that's something you'd have to contend with. There are bike boxes for the left turns. And so in this case, instead of weaving across to get over to the left turn, you could come across, sit in the bike box, and get a little bit of a leading interval here to start before the cars going across. There are 6-foot buffers between the sidewalks. Okay, standard sidewalk configuration with a 2-stage crossing. So there's one storage location here. So we would show these types of views, and they would just sit there and go over and over again while they were talking so they could kind of get a view of what they were looking at. And we also had printouts for them to look at some specific views that they could go back to pretty easily. So we recognize that you show something like a DDI, and it looks very overwhelming when you look at it from a plan view. But when you look at it from the street or you actually drive one, it has a different feel to it. So we wanted to make sure they saw what it looked like from the roadway. All right, so that's the only time I'm going to show a video because they just take too long. Design number 2. So everything's very similar, except now the bike lanes still cross the right turn pockets, but they can use a ramp to enter and exit at the intersection. So you'll notice you can come up here and enter and exit if you were taking a right turn. There's entry and exit points away from the intersection. So as a bicyclist, that is a caveat there to the design that might be of interest to them. Just a design feature, it could be incorporated with other things. So we introduced that. Design 3, the major difference here is that the bicycles actually come off the roadway. Think of a shared use path type application. Okay, and they are adjacent to the sidewalks with a small buffer between the roadway and between the bike lane and the pedestrian sidewalk facilities. Now there are channelized right turn lanes, so this is a design feature that was brought up several times by pedestrians that they did not like. They didn't like them at all. And so this was one of the things that was discussed a lot also from a pedestrian standpoint. Does everybody kind of get the sense of how this works? All right. So very similar type conversation in each one of the 3 design features that we mentioned. Again, we would get their feedback and so forth. Now for the super street, just quickly how that works, east to west. Okay, the road actually does turn to the east up there. You just can't see it, so it's eastbound. East to west, you would come to the U-turn and go across. West to north. And south to west. Come on, car. Okay. So everybody got the sense there? Again, it's all about the left turns. Now, we would explain to them, why these are important from an efficiency standpoint. The main difference here is when we cut off in the median U-turn that through direction, we now have 2 one-way streets. And if you're from the Madison area, I'm sure you have plenty of one-way streets around here. You understand how easy they are to coordinate. And so you can coordinate these, control speeds. From an access management standpoint, they're great. You can put more signals up and down. It's the only design I know you can put more signals and it doesn't cause a problem. Okay, if you want to put a ped crossing mid-block, go for it. It doesn't hurt a thing. So design 1 looks something like this. So the bike lanes are in the roadway in this configuration, and bikes are going to U-turn. Going to U-turn have 2 options. They either weave or use the mid-block. So if you're a bicyclist, you would come out of the lane, weave across. So the more aggressive bicyclist might choose to do that. Or you can come over in your bike lane. Excuse me, no. You would come across, and then you could actually dismount or ride across and come over. So looking at it a little further, the PEDs, just zooming in on it, the PEDs use what we call a Z crossing. That's a very standard crossing type, but they also have the mid-block crossing at the U-turn available if they want to go from far part of the quadrant. And again, it's a 2-stage crossing, so it's presumed to be more safe than crossing the entire road. Design number 2, we have separated bike lanes. So you saw that concept. This one was presented in North Carolina because we have lots of super streets. By the way, the median U-turn was presented in Michigan. So we talked about the super street in North Carolina. We talked about separating the bike lanes and having more standard PED crossings. So now instead of having the Z, kind of make the Z shape, you actually have straight crossings. Now that backs up the stop bars, so the clearance intervals are longer from a signal standpoint. There's some trade-offs here. Okay, but presumably we're going to get some feedback about having to walk out of your way to go straight across and things like that. So we wanted to introduce this as a concept. Again, you see what it looks like. There's still 2-stage crossings. There's not really storage area here, so we don't call that a stage. You could store here if you wanted to. But 2-stage crossing on the main line, and again, the same buffers are present between the roadway and the bikeway and then the sidewalk. So you can kind of get a sense of what that would look like. Design 3, back to bikes being in the road. Crossings are still able to be made at the mid-block. No left turns are now at the main intersection, so this left turn, the leftover, if you think about it from a driveway standpoint, is no longer present. Standard PED crossings across the main, kind of how you expect them intuitively as a pedestrian, but non-standard free movements in the median. So you can literally walk down the median and go to the other quadrant without having to cross up here. So this is a very different type of design. In fact, this hasn't been implemented as far as I know at any super streets. In fact, the only one that I'm aware of that doesn't allow that left turn is 15501 in Chapel Hill. There may be others that Gil's aware of, but that's the only one that I know of. Again, bike boxes are here for priority, okay, and it does give a leading signal indication for the bike to be able to start a little bit earlier. But these days with e-bikes, who's ridden an e-bike? Oh, y'all got to ride one. I rode one, that thing will take off from the cars. It's incredible. Standard PED crossings again in the non-standard movement. Okay, displaced left turns. What's my time look like, Larry? Okay, I'm doing okay. Displaced left turns, okay, sometimes called a CFI, continuous flow intersection. Okay, the left turn is displaced and crosses over it, so now it doesn't conflict with the through. Okay, a normal right turn movement and a normal through movement. So it's really about this left turn, displacing this left turn so it doesn't conflict anymore. Design 1 Now, in all of these assumptions, the CFI, or the DLT, whatever you want to call it, the right turn is going to be assumed no right turn on red, similar to what they do in Utah. And all crosswalks fully protected, and in this case, a channelized right turn. This is a 5-stage crossing, so you can see the different stages across the main, with bite boxes for the left turn. So you see some of these different design features, going across the designs. Advanced bike signal present, and right turns must cross the bike lane before it splits off. So you can see here, when that right, if that right has got a pocket, you're going to have to cross it. So that's something that bicyclists needed to be aware of. Design 2, again, you see the shared bike lane. You see all the similar components that I've talked about earlier, except now we have a 2-stage crossing. This is really the only place you can store pedestrians safely. And then design 3 is back to a 5-stage crossing on the main with bike boxes and left turns in the roadway. And right turns must cross the bike lane. Okay, again, crossing over here, you just can't see it. And then the last one that we did in Utah was the DDI. And I think everybody understands how these work at this point, but just to make sure, a through looks like that. A left turn looks something like this. And a left turn on the freeway looks like that. Everybody there? Okay, design 1 has this, what we call the center walkway. Okay, this is a very common design. A lot of people like it. A lot of people dislike it. All crosswalks are signalized except at the on-ramps. Okay, and bicycle lanes are in the roadway, and the feature that was pointed out most of the time was when that bicycle lane came next to the barrier wall coming in here, what does that look like? There was a lot of discussion about that in our focus groups. Design number 2, the walkway is now on the outside, but we do allow crossing of the Y line here along the main. All crosswalks, again, signalized except the on-ramp movements and bicycle lanes, again, are in the roadway. And then design 3, you see this similar component with the bikes taken off the road, with the bicycle lanes being separated and walkway along the outside. And then you actually see a unique feature, which I haven't seen in design yet, where you kind of cross at this pinch point across the Y line as an option. So very quickly, the general findings that we found, now we haven't written a thing up about this. Literally last week we just did the Utah focus groups. But just some general consensus among our team that we heard as we were doing these focus groups in each of the 4 locations across the U.S. is that PEDs, they do not like channelized turn lanes. They're not comfortable for PEDs, especially in an environment where it's a little bit confusing. They don't like CTLs. They don't like, they feel like people are looking over their left shoulder, not paying any attention to what they're doing on the side of the road. And so in a few focus groups, accessibility was brought up for the visually impaired, but that was not something that was mentioned a whole lot. But they don't like the channelization, especially with acceleration lanes. They just feel like people are less likely to yield, and it's not a safe environment. Anytime there's multi-stage crossings, 3 or more, it actually was not desirable. So from a level of comfort standpoint, when I think of multi-stage crossings as an engineer, it's a place to store someone. They see it as a place for you to make me sit in the middle of the road and wait until I get another crossing indication. They don't like it. They don't feel safe sitting in the middle of the road. So right turn on red was not desirable at any of these facilities, especially the more complex it got. So at the CFI, that was the very first question I got asked last week when I was doing the CFI. Do you allow right turn on red or not? That came up immediately. They did not want right turners to be able to turn right on red there. Bikes, left turn weaves across heavy traffic was not desirable. So we had several bike advocates that said they would try it only in off-peak conditions, but they felt like for the average bicyclist, if you're thinking about a parent who's got a kid with them or something like that, they're not going to use an environment like that unless they absolutely have to. Maybe they don't have any other way to travel and they have to cross it. They're not going to use it if you make them travel on the road, especially if you make them do some type of weave. And then off-road bicycle facilities were definitely, in every case, were much more comfortable for the average user, which obviously that would be the preference if you had the right-of-way. But especially with the complex design. So this was reiterated multiple times with the CFI. They really liked the bicycles to be able to get off the facility. That's just not somewhere somebody would want to put a bicycle in the road. All right, with that, I'll give some questions. You can ask Gil questions too, okay? I didn't list him here. He didn't list me on a couple of those papers, so I'm getting him back. I'm giving him a hard time. But Bastian is the PI with Kittleson and Associates, so if you have any desire to reach out for him on anything related to this, safety operations or focus groups, he'll have that information as the project progresses. Okay, questions?
Yeah, I had two questions. One is, who deals with the snow? How do you deal with the snow in these innovative designs? You get a sidewalk down the median. In Wisconsin, that median is going to be full of snow, so how would you deal with that in a northern climate?
Yeah, I don't know anything about snow. I'm in North Carolina. It melts really fast.
I mean, I really liked it, but I'm just thinking of the practicality. And the second question I had is, in Wisconsin, we tell our bicyclists they can make left turns at busy intersections in one of two ways. They can go out with the cars and turn left in the left turn lane if they want to. But we advise them often to stay in the right lane, proceed through the red light, and then stop when they reach the right side of the crossing.
Yes.
Turn their bicycle and then proceed with the green light in the opposite direction. I didn't see that as an option.
Yes, it is an option. That's the bike boxes I was referring to. So you'll see right here, there's a bike box. So they would come across, stop, and then go across. Yeah. And so that was definitely a preferred option.
And then in terms of the snow, I mean, it's really hard to maintain for snow in any environment for any intersection. So the question really for almost any intersection, I mean, it's a little bit more involved for these innovative designs, but this is not stopping states from building them. Minnesota has 5 DDIs right now, a couple more in the horizon. Michigan has a few. So there are various states in the north that are building these, and you just got to go to your maintenance crew and figure out how. I mean, it can be a little more of an inconvenience for the maintenance crew that they're something different, you know, because they're used to trying to do the same thing over and over again. So you'd have to make an adjustment for snow, but they're figuring it out.
Would you build the facilities wide enough so that you can put a truck up them and just plow them? Or?
So sometimes they have, and I know in Minnesota they're talking about not having curbs, and so that the plow can actually get over there. Now, I mean, that's a little dangerous for the whole entire section, but just have a place where you can have a curb down where they can sneak in there, a strategic location.
Have you thought about the pros and cons with your findings compared to the actual bicycle safety literature? For example, like I got a grant, so I did a lot of research on this topic. And for example, a lot of bicyclists prefer to be separated from traffic or have some kind of indicator on the road, like for example, a green path.
Yep.
And they prefer that, but actually the research shows that a lot of times that they almost think it's like their road then, and they kind of forget about cars, so like they're on a bike path that's near a road and they cross the intersection, there's a lot more crashes. So basically my point is that while like a lot of your findings like what they prefer, did you actually think about kind of like the pros and cons compared to what's actually been found to be safe?
Yeah. So that's one of the areas that they're looking at on the safety side, and I know some of that literature has been summarized, and it's probably what led Kittleson's the one that led that, I believe, along with some others on the team, to come up with some of these designs that don't have those marked type paths. So when you see that in green for the shared facility, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's actually going to be green painted sidewalk or anything like that. So what we really focused them on was the specific design feature. Don't worry about the specifics of it. Do you like the feature? And so, do you like being off the road or on the road? Do you like the CLT, or do you those types of things? What is it that you want to know about?
So with all the findings from this research, would you still consider this as a safer environment for bicyclists and pedestrians?
I think that would be inconclusive at this point. We're really just starting the project. But I think what we're trying to do is recognize that we're trying to provide an environment that works for vehicles, bicyclists, and pedestrians. And so we're trying to make it as safe as possible while accomplishing a good level of service for everybody. And so how can we make it better? It's kind of what Gil was saying earlier, where there was a lot of focus put on trying to make it more efficient and safe for vehicles, and we're trying to catch up on the bike and ped side. We've been saying that for years. We need to put more focus on it.
With any design, it's difficult to accommodate all modes.
Yes. I agree. Yes, so Gil, he's come up with all kinds of fancy little drawings that you haven't even seen. So there's no way, it'd take 2 hours to go through all those. The first time we had Gil on the project, the first time he went through the 84,000 options, it took more than the 2 hours that we had in that meeting. So, but yes, that is an option to be able to cross where you're talking about where the left turn crosses over. There's a couple options for that. There's more than one. Gil's got a presentation I'm sure he'd be glad to share with you.
Yeah, I have a paper.
And a paper, yeah.
You talked a lot about different kinds of innovative interchanges, and as transportation planners and engineers, it's somewhat easy to understand how that works, but how difficult would that be to educate the general public about it?
Yeah, and that's the biggest hiccup. So in North Carolina, I'll just use a specific example. In North Carolina, super streets are extremely popular. What we found in North Carolina is it's much easier to implement those in an unsignalized environment, similar to what you've done for driveway openings with leftovers and things like that. And we've been able to prove that they're much safer, 70% reduction in collisions versus trying to cross, a 4-lane divided roadway with an opening in the middle. Things like that are not safe. But in an urban environment where we're trying to do signalization, the businesses especially, they just throw their hands in the air. Anything you do to change their access, as we all know, is going to be a problem from the business standpoint. In fact, I have a presentation about that tomorrow. And so I think that's part of the reason, not just from a cost standpoint, that you've seen the DDI take off is because it's not right in front of their business. They don't feel like you're cutting off their access. And so the super street, as an example, I went to a meeting 8 or 9 years ago. A lot of these alternative intersection designs, especially a super street, it's kind of an intermediate step before you go grade separated. And so you can get 20 plus more years life out of a facility without having to go build a $3, $4, $5 million bridge structure. And so 64, they were looking at building Highway 64, a super street corridor through there. On one side you had a school that was being built. On the other side you had Target and of course all the out parcels that come with that. And then school was going to be letting out, so where are the kids going to go? And so you have businesses throwing their hand in there, but then you also, at the public meeting, had parents. And of course, when you get parents there about their kids, you know what's going to happen. And so I'm sitting in the back, and I'm watching DOT get ready to put this meeting on, and boy, I just cringed. It was bad. But they really missed a lot of the key points there. When we went and did focus groups specifically for super streets before this project came on, I think that's part of the reason we won the project, is because we already done this before. With the super street, and we talked to some of these advocates and citizens and parents who lived in this area. They started asking questions, and we were like, well, you have a 2-stage crossing, so you're crossing a one-way road with 2 lanes, and then you have a nice big 40-foot wide median to stand in, and then you cross another direction that's only 2 lanes, about 24 feet, and then they cross, and it's very safe. They're like, oh. The key points weren't really brought out from the pedestrian standpoint. It was all about how much traffic we can get through there and how safe they are for vehicles. And so it's really important to make sure you're talking to all the users, I guess is what I'm saying, and get those key nuggets out.
One more minute.
We actually kind of finished on time. Good job, Gil. All right. I think that's it.